So I found out later on just how devastating
Children
the
decided it
sunset
was time for mother and father.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be back with you. I was with your group a year ago, May, according to my records, and I'm very glad to come back and play for you again. I came over from Hiram this morning to play for you. We have snow there.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, we do.
You'll probably have more on Friday.
Right, right. As you can see, and as you know if you came last time, I do have a variety of instruments. So I'm going to be switching instruments a lot. It'll be a combination of the familiar and the bizarre. So I'll start out on familiar territory because everyone's heard an accordion. Thank you. That was a little medley of traditional tunes. And in keeping with my promise to keep switching instruments, I'm putting this down and getting my guitar out. And this will be a familiar tune. I invite you to sing along. The more the merrier. Anybody know Hey Good Lookin'? What you got cooking? Seems fitting for Thanksgiving coming on somehow. I heard Lisa say Thanksgiving's her favorite holiday.
It is. No pressure.
So feel free to sing along. Hey, hey, good looking. What you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Hey, sweet baby, I don't need baby. How's about trying a brand new recipe? I got a hot rod full and $2 bill. I know a spot right over the hill where the soda pop and the dance is free. So come on, baby, take a ride with me. Hey, hey, good looking. I'm writing your name on every page. Hey, hey, you. What you gonna cook? I said I'm cooking something up with me. Thank you.
Toast tempting, doesn't it?
Yes.
Written by the late great Hank Williams. Yes. Well, setting that down, I'm going to get out my ukulele, or as I believe they would say in Hawaii, which is has become associated with this, ukulele. I believe that's how it would be pronounced in the Hawaiian language. I believe the instrument was actually introduced to Hawaii by Portuguese sailors. So, but it really took hold there and was introduced in the United States in the 19-teens. I'm thinking it might have been 1916. Was kind of a World's Fair event. And the ukulele came into public awareness in America and got very popular for a while. It faded kind of out of sight, but as I'm sure many of you know, there's a bit of a resurgence now.
Yeah.
Ukulele clubs, ukulele groups, right and left. And I invite you to sing with me on Side by Side. Ain't got a barrel of money. Maybe we're ragged and funny, but we'll travel along, singing a song. Side by side, that's it. Ain't got a barrel of money. Maybe we're ragged and funny. Travel along, singing a song. Side by side. Don't know what's coming tomorrow. Maybe it's trouble and sorrow. Travel the road, sharing our load, side by side. Through all kinds of weather, what if the sky should fall? Long as we're together, doesn't really matter at all. When they've all had their quarrels and parted, we will leave the same as we started. Travel along, singing a song, side by side.
Right.
Thank you.
Was that the song that Arthur Godfrey used to play?
I wouldn't be surprised if he did. I know he really popularized the uke with his
Every
TV.
Saturday night or whatever it was.
You know, I never saw the show, but I know he was noted as a player of the uke. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Daily show too.
He had a daily show too? Oh my goodness. Wow. Thank you. Feel free to make comments and ask questions as I'm going along. Thank you very much. All right, let's see. I am going to totally switch gears now and get into territory that's a little less familiar. I did bring this last time I was here, and perhaps you've seen these anyways. This is my hammered dulcimer. And I play it with these little wooden mallets that are referred to as hammers. I don't know why, but there's another very different instrument that's also referred to as the dulcimer. The word dulcimer basically means sweet sounding. And if you've ever looked inside a piano, you've seen the hammers. So in a sense, this is an ancestor of the piano. I understand that they were invented in Persia centuries ago. We now know Persia as Iran. And there's a bit of a debate over exactly how long ago it was invented. There's an argument that it probably wasn't invented until we had the technology to make drawn wire from metal. Because the thinking is that gut strings, which would have been the earlier version of musical strings, would not have been appropriate for this kind of instrument. So I am going to play a few more traditional tunes on the dulcimer. I think we'll have a little set of Irish jigs. Going on. There is a lot going on. I should mention for anyone who may be a drummer or know anyone who is, the way you hold these hammers, you hold them very lightly and it's like drumsticks. They want to bounce. So occasionally you'll hear, depending on how I'm controlling the sticks, you'll hear repeat. Because it'll bounce. To manage that as a player, but it's related to drumming. In a way, this is a percussion instrument. Yeah. Any other questions about this?
How did you learn how to play all this?
Oh, all this?
Yeah.
Well, I should go back to the piano, which was the first thing I learned to play. When I was little, my family did not have a piano. I used to visit my great aunt. This is up in Milo, Maine, up in Piscataquis County, where I grew up, and I'd play on Auntie's piano, or try to play. I was quite small. So my parents decided to get me a piano. My mother went to the local Lions Club auction, where she got a piano for $1, because no one else bid on it. And the Lions Club even delivered it to the house.
Yep.
So I was able to start taking piano lessons. There was a lovely lady who lived in the neighborhood, charged 75 cents a lesson. I was in first grade when I started, and I took piano lessons all the way up through high school. So that was a very good grounding for learning other instruments. The second instrument I took up was the guitar. My mother saved S&H green stamps.
Yeah.
Remember S&H
Yeah.
green
Yeah.
stamps? You could get all kinds of premiums if you had shopped enough at your local store. And she got me a guitar on S&H green stamps. It's not this guitar. It was a lighter weight beginner's model. But that's how I got started. And one thing led to another from there.
Wow.
Yes. So piano is a very good starting place, I think. And I was fortunate in that I really wanted to learn. I tend to think that forcing kids to take lessons probably is counterproductive. You don't want them to hate the music.
Yes.
So yes, that's the background for me. That's how I got started. And I've also become interested, as things would have it, in a rather unusual category of instruments that have come to be known as fretless zithers. You may be familiar with the German or Austrian zither. It's the instrument that there was a movie in the 50s, I believe, that had what was known as the Harry Lime theme. I think there might have been another name for it that goes da 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 da.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was on a zither. And that kind of zither has a fretboard along one edge, a fretboard being like the neck of a guitar. So you're really doing two things at once. You have it on a table in front of you, you're doing stuff as if you were fretting a guitar, and at the same time you're plucking strings. It's very challenging. I own one, I've tried it. I can tell you it's quite challenging. And so, with the rise of mass manufacture and mass advertising, various people got the idea, we will make easier to play alternatives to the Alpine zither. And they came up with literally dozens of variations. Of course, they still had to be tuned, and that was always, I think, the weak spot about these. This was before we had electronic tuners. I'm very lucky. I have a little battery-operated device. Let me hold it up. Now, there are various models of these. Some people have apps on their smartphones. But this thing is battery operated. It gives me a readout whether I'm sharp or flat. I can tune much more quickly than I possibly could on ear, which is very handy because I have hundreds of strings here. I tuned everything last night, and then I had to retune a little bit of it this morning. So the multiplicity of the strings is kind of a weakness of the category, but now we have electronic tuners. Now this is an instrument called the Phono Harp #1. And this company, at the time they put this out, they were based in Boston. At some point in their history, they actually were based in South Berwick, Maine. This, in a way, is a simplified auto harp. You can see I have some metal channels here that you can only access certain strings, which gives you different chords if you run your pick in the channels. This being version #1, it's only very simple, 3 chords. There was a phono harp #2 that gave you more chords. And I'm going to do a little tune that I wrote. little marking here on this metal attachment that says it was patented in August 4th, 1891. So this one goes back a ways. I seem to recall I got this instrument at a yard sale, which is a pretty good find. There is one instrument among this category of fretless zithers that is much more familiar, and that is the auto harp. These are still manufactured in the United States, and I'm sure in Germany and other places. And it's similar in a way to that phono harp, but in that, excuse me, I have too much stuff in my pocket, and I have my auto harp picks in there too. There, I've gotten to the bottom of it. You can see I have a number of buttons here. Each one of those buttons is attached to a bar which spans the entire set of strings. If you struck the strings without putting down a bar, you'd have chaos. Interesting chaos, but chaos. But each bar has a felt pattern on the underside, and it is cut out strategically to allow only the strings you want to ring. In that way, it's related to the concept of the phonoharp number 1, which only allowed you access to the correct strings for the chord. So you can choose your chord, and it comes out quite nicely. I am taking up wearing finger picks. So I have also, and I do continue to also just play with a guitar pick. I think you will recognize this tune. Yeah, anybody want to name that tune?
Well, I could sing it, but I couldn't remember what it was called.
There is a hymn text set to it, which the version that's most commonly sung is "Be Still My Soul."
Oh, yes.
The tune is by Sibelius, and the tune on its own is known as Finlandia.
Finlandia.
Finlandia. Yes.
Did you get a lot of requests around Christmas time to be accompanying the carolers?
Oh, well, I have done that, but my life has kind of taken an interesting turn. I got married to a fellow from England about 6 years ago, and so we're spending Christmas in England now. We do Christmas carols in England too. I'll tell you something very interesting to me is in several instances they sing the texts that we know to tunes that we in America do not ordinarily use for them. I mean, we think of "O Little Town of Bethlehem" probably as "Oh, little town of Bethlehem," but they don't know that tune. They sing O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie, and etc. It's been very interesting to learn the British versions of the Christmas carols. And actually, my husband and I belong to a Quaker meeting over there, and Quakers have silent worship, but when we're coming up to Christmas, we have a little music session after our silent worship, and I do bring in an instrument and we do sing the Christmas carols. Yes, it is a great deal of fun. Yes, thanks for the question. Any other questions about the auto harp? All right, let's see what else I've got here in my bag of tricks then. Oh boy, I'm getting out the marxophone next. This is one of my favorites. This was patented in 1912, sold door to door, was invented by a gentleman known as Henry C. Marx. I've been told that he was Karl Marx's nephew. I haven't been able to confirm that. This has a mechanism which in a way is related to the hammered dulcimer. That bouncing effect I showed you with the hammers is achieved here. I have a little keyboard. It's like 2 octaves of white keys on the piano. And each key has a spring steel extension with a lead weight on the end, so it will bounce. It's a brilliant idea, really. And over here, they gave some open chords to strum. This was play by number. There's a guide to the notes here, which each note has not only its image as written music, it has its note name and a number. One of the big selling points of these, which were sold door to door, and some of them in popular catalogs like Sears, the big selling point was no need to read music, just follow the numbers. We will sell you numbered music. What could be easier? And that is true until the instrument goes out of tune, as I said before. That's the weakness. But it's a great concept. And although Mr. Marx did not imagine it being plucked, it's also kind of nice to pluck. So I'm going to do a couple of original songs now that employ all these aspects of the instrument. I'm going to start out plucking it, which I guess would have surprised Mr. Marx, but here we go. The tune is called Snowbound. It happens to be on my CD. I do have some CDs if anyone's excited. My husband says you're a terrible salesperson. You never mention them, so I'm mentioning them. If my husband watches Gorham Community TV, he'll have proof. Thank you for covering this.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
This tune is called Snowbound, which I wrote when I was.
snowflakes.
Yeah, yeah, I was stuck in my place on Hiram Hill, snow coming down, might as well play some music. Through the fire and back again, my mother's only daughter, to touch the earth, drink the air, and dwell beside the water. Wings and song, the grace of birds, reminders of the spirit. How my soul open wide, tune my heart to hear it. Through the fire and back again, my mother's only daughter, to feel the earth and taste the air and rest beside the water. I'd love to turn people on to this. Very clever invention. The marxophone.
After your piano lessons, how did you learn to play all these other instruments?
Oh, well, it's a very good background. For instance, this one, this attachment here is like 2 octaves of white keys on the piano. So that was pretty straightforward. When Mr. Marx invented this and produced play-by-number music, they imagined you would just play one-handed over here. But me being a piano player, I get on there and play two-handed. Because I had that training, which I'm very grateful for. Yes, that's one example of it. The accordion is another place that the piano training came in handy. Totally, because you have the same kind of keyboard there. I had a friend who played accordion, and she oriented me to the button side. And the buttons are set up in a repeating pattern, so once you're used to that, you can find your way around. One of the beauties of the fretless zithers is that they do have the suggested tuning printed on them, along with the numbers. So you have a starting place. You know what notes were intended. I sometimes modify them a little bit, but I have kind of a grounding in the suggested tuning. Yeah. Any other questions
You take all
on?
these to England with you? All these?
Oh, no. You know, I used to take this one and the one I'm going to show you next. But what I've done now is I had a spare marxophone and I've left it there. I have a spare thing that's related to the one I'm about to show you, and I've taken that there and left it there. I have a spare ukulele I've taken over and left it there. Now, I've gotten busy on eBay. eBay exists in Great Britain as well as the United States, the online auction. And I have acquired a number of instruments. So I have a whole collection in England too. I have several things which were of European manufacture that were similar to this. And I have those there. I was able to get an accordion on eBay. So I'm pretty well supplied.
I should say.
Yes, I got, well, I got an instrument similar to the hammered dulcimer. I got one, it's called a santur. Santur would have been the original name when it was invented in Persia. And the santur, which is a little smaller and just tuned a little differently, quadruple strung though, 4 strings for each note, so it's quite a tuning task. I got a santur on eBay, so I'm well equipped. Yes. Any other questions at this point? I'll move on to the violin guitar then. Mr. Marks had the Marxophone, which we just looked at, manufactured in Hoboken, New Jersey. But he didn't stick around in New Jersey. He went out to New Troy, Michigan, and he founded an enterprise known as the Marxo-Chime Colony, which invented really a pretty large number of instruments. Some were better designed than others. Some were extremely naive. I had a kind of a guitar-like affair that was supposed to be open chords played with the slide. I tuned it up and it destroyed itself, basically, because it wasn't strong enough to hold the tension of the strings. This was one of their more successful inventions. This is the violin guitar. It's the violin because of the bow. And it came with built-in rosin, which sat right there in that little spot.
Oh, wow.
Every bow needs rosin, which is based on tree pitch, to get you a grip on your strings. This, ladies and gentlemen, is built into its own handy carrying case. Isn't that clever? You can see a piano image here. That piano image is a guide to the bowed strings. Each note has its own string. And again, we have open chords, as we did on the Marxophone. Again, it is play by number. And as you can see on this keyboard, there are black keys as well as white keys. This means you have sharps and flats. That means you have your choice of keys. Well, they've only given me 5 chords over here, so what about that? Well, they added a device that works like a guitar capo. You can slide it up, clamp it down, and raise all your chords. So they were really thinking. And there are variations on this known as the ukulele and some other names. These several fretless zithers I'm showing you are literally the tip of the iceberg. There were quite a number of different play-by-number instruments. I have some more at home. I debated how many to bring, and I figured there's only so much we can look at in 1 hour. So, as I said, there would have been play-by-number music to familiar tunes of the day. I tend to make arrangements for other songs. And I'm going to do that here with a song known as Quiet Joys. The words are by Richard Farina. I've modified them a little bit for gender inclusivity. And the tune is an ancient Irish tune known in English as My Lagan Love. Along the salt sea strand, the colors blend and roll as one, together in the sound, and oft-times do the winds entwine to send their distant call, the quiet joys of brotherhood, and love is over all. The oak and wheat together rise up from the common ground. The mare and stallions, light and dark, have thunder in their sound, and the rainbow signs the blended flood. Still have my heart and throat the quiet joys of sisterhood, and love is over all. But men have come to plough the tide. The oak lies on the ground. I hear their fires in the field. They drive the stallions down, and the roses bleed, both light and dark. The winds do seldom fall, but the running sands recall a time when love was over all.
Really pretty.
Thank you. Violin guitar. That's a hyphenated word, by the way. How are we doing for time? Oh, I guess we got time for a couple more.
Absolutely.
All right, good, because I have another instrument to show. And this one is known as the harpalike. I believe that's a German word. These are still manufactured in Germany. though they were invented in the 1890s in Sweden by a gentleman who didn't get on with the German or Austrian standard zither with the fretboard. He made something which was, in a way, if you didn't count the tuning, it's much easier. He set up a bunch of clusters of very rich chords. I think it's just lovely. They have very rich basses. And each cluster, you can kind of see them. I think this is really genius. They have very high strings with the tuning pin halfway down the instrument, so you can have very high notes. And it's the harp-alike. And I am going to share a song which was written by a friend of mine. Her name is Sarah Pirtle. She lives in Massachusetts. And I think it's pretty easy to sing along on, so if you feel like jumping in, go for it. The more the merrier. My roots go down, down into the earth. I should probably just mention before I start, you'll see me moving my left hand. What I'm doing there is damping the chord I just finished playing. So you only have one chord ringing at once. Otherwise, the sound would get very muddy. So that's why I'm following my strumming with the other hand, one chord behind. Takes a while to get used to, but hopefully I can keep track. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a flower reaching for the sun. I am a flower reaching for the sun. I am a flower reaching for the sun. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a tree by the riverside. I am a tree by the riverside. I am a tree by the riverside. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. Oh, my roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am a mountain, still and strong. I am a mountain, still and strong. I am a mountain, still and strong. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. Oh, my roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. I am the will to survive. I am the will to survive. I am the will to survive. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down. We're rising up with the force of life. Rising up with the force of life. Rising up with the force of life. My roots go down. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, down into the earth. My roots go down, in here while we're having fun. I have something quite different I'd like to show you. Move this back. You asked about my instruments in England. I actually acquired this also on British eBay. This is a low D whistle. You've probably all seen penny whistles, which are about half the size and much more slender. This one can play lower because it is larger. And
Almost a flute.
yes, it is. And I do play the flute. I played the flute in the high school band when I was a teenager up in Milo, Maine, at the Pencos Valley High School Band. I have another instrument here. This is a shruti box. It's a rather elaborate shruti box. It has a pedal. Most shruti boxes do not have a pedal. The shruti box was developed in India. It is a free reed instrument, like the accordion. You can see the bellows moving. And this one is tunable. I can choose what notes are playing by manipulating these openings. And shruti boxes usually are much simpler and are pumped with one hand. However, if you have a hand busy pumping, you really can't play the whistle or anything else. They're used for singing, to have a drone and to do singing, but some clever person figured out how to attach a pedal. And I'm going to play a few tunes on the low D whistle with the shruti box drone. I haven't really read up on it, but my theory about the Shruti box is that it was developed because European missionaries to India brought pump organs, and those got miniaturized into smaller things which are now known as harmoniums, which are little keyboard boxes, wind-driven like this, that are, you pump it with one hand. And the Shruti box would have been an even further simplified version of that. So I think we have probably the pump organ as the ancestor of the Shruti box. That's just my best guess. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Catherine, how many instruments do you play all together?
I don't know. I have some more at home I didn't bring. You know, and some things I've got a tune or two for demonstration purposes, but I have so many I haven't developed a large repertoire on them, so I don't know whether it's fair to count it or not if all I have is one or two tunes, but yes, I can play them. My husband will claim that I have over 100. I don't know if he's right. Some of them are duplicates.
Where would you place the pump organ that you used to have in your house for afternoon song fest relative to the development of the organ?
Oh, good question. Right, there is a whole history about that, and I can't remember it. This actually gives me an opportunity to say if you get online to look things up, I invite you to look at my website. I've tried to make it quite informational about instruments. And I actually have a little write-up on the history of the pump organ, but I kind of wrote it up and didn't remember every detail of it. My website is KatherineRhoda.com. That's KatherineRhoda.com.
Since I can't remember that, if I give you this piece of paper, will you write it down?
I would be happy to. I can give you my business card if that's helpful. We can do that. But I've made it a very educational website. You can look under instruments. My most recent CD actually features a pump organ tune, which is why I bothered to talk about the history of the pump organ. The great aunt, whose piano I used to play, used to have a pump organ, and it had been relegated to what they called the shed chamber. You know what that is? You know, the old connected structures where the barn was connected to the house, and this kind of in-between place upstairs was known as the shed chamber. So when I was a kid growing up in Milo, Maine, I used to go up in the shed chamber and mess around with Auntie's pump organ, and eventually she gave it to me, and I had it overhauled.
Yeah, it was almost as popular as the piano at one particular point in time.
Yes.
Because it gave you a little more variety without too much effort. You didn't have to be a fancy piano player to have something nice.
No, you didn't, and you could get, well, there were a limited set of stops, but you could get different effects, different volumes. There were stops, so you could be playing in octaves. It was called an octave coupler. You get a pretty big sound out of some of these things. Yes.
So how did you go from the piano and the flute? What was your first unusual?
The first unusual thing, let me first just set this back so nobody trips over it. The first unusual thing I got was, I didn't actually bring it, but it's called a ukulele, and it is related to the violin guitar but has less strings and less chords. And the ukulele, bowed instrument, 4 chords, not fully chromatic, I got at a folk music shop in Camden, Maine. When I was in college, I had heard somebody play an instrument called the bowed psaltery. Now, I'm not sure. This is kind of, I've seen different stories about this. Some people think the bowed psaltery is medieval. Some people think it was invented in the 1920s by a German music educator. And the bowed psaltery is really the basis for these bowed, multi-stringed bowed instruments. The bowed psaltery itself is triangular. Some of them are quite narrow triangular, and you bow just like this. You have one note per string, but there are no chords on it. And I had heard someone play a bowed psaltery in college, and I was just so taken with the sound that when I saw the ukulele, which is similar to the violin guitar, I understood it to be a bowed psaltery with chords, and I got it for, I think, $30. And then a friend who dealt in the flea market that used to be in Freeport found a marxophone and gave it to me. And so I had a ukulele and a marxophone, and so I became aware of this funny backwater, really, of American musical innovation with the play-by-number phenomenon and the sold door-to-door history. And once I became aware of them, you know how it is when you start to pay attention to something, people start to tell you about it, where you can find another one, or you start to notice things you never noticed before. And gradually, I gathered more, and now that I'm on to them, well, that's pretty much the story. Yeah. Any other questions? I guess we've done it then. It looks like we've done our time. And I thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And a privilege.
Thank you for coming back.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks again to GoCat for filming.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I would be happy to give you my card, sir, that, if you want.